Hello students, welcome to my educational channel EasyEd. Now today we'll continue with the next topic of first chapter. Now, next topic is diversity of living world. Now diversity. What do you understand by diversity? You all know that there are huge number of organisms in this world. There are many plants, many animals, there are huge variety of plants and animals in this world. Okay, such as there are different kinds of plants. Some are small plants, some are big trees, some are soft herbs, some are bushy shrubs, some bear flowers, some do not bear flowers, some give you fruit, many don't give you fruit. So there are variety, some are edible, some are medicinal, huge variety of plants. Similarly, in animals, there is a huge variety of animals, such as there are small animals, there are large animals, there are herbivores, there are carnivores, there are small insects, there are birds, there are water animals. So there are a huge variety of plants and animals. That is, there is a huge variety of living organisms existing in this world. So this huge variety is known as diversity. Okay, this is called as diversity. And when we are talking about living organisms, we can say it is biodiversity. Okay, now what does biodiversity means? Biodiversity means a large variety of plants and animals, all the living organisms which are existing around us. Some we know, some we don't know, but there are a large variety of organisms. Okay, this is biodiversity. Now, when there is so much amount of biodiversities, when there are huge variety of plants and animals, how will you recognize these plants and animals? How will you come to know about different kinds of plants and animals, different kinds of organisms? How will you identify them? How will you call them? So there exists a need of naming those organisms. How will we study about all these vast variety of organisms? How do our parents, our friends in society, people recognize us by our names? Similarly, to study, to know about this variety of plants and animals, that is living organisms, there exists a need of naming them. This naming of the living organisms is known as nomenclature. All right, a new word maybe for you. What is nomenclature? Nomenclature means naming the living organisms. And why naming is necessary? To identify them, to study them, to know about them. Now, what do you mean by identification? What is identification? How will you know about them? Or how will you name them? Identification means to recognize them based upon some specific characters. Okay, there are some specific characters possessed by each organism. That character we have to identify them, those characters, their specific characters, and based upon those characters we give names to those organisms. Okay, now in biology, the name and nomenclature is an important procedure to study the living organisms. Now, About naming, you all have a common name at your home, but the outsiders, they know you by some other name. Why there is so difference? Our parents, our family members call us by the common name, but this common name, if some outsider has been asked that by this common name, that do you know this person, will he know them? No, because outside you are having some specific name, a different name by which people recognize you, no, by which people know you. Similarly, what happens that you know that this is a huge, large word. In within a country also there are different kinds of people speaking different languages. All over the world there are different people having different languages. So what will happen if we give a name in our language? Will other persons able to recognize it? For example, we know what is mango. Okay, we know what is mango, we know what is cat, we know what is dog, we know what is wheat. All right, these are all English names. People also know these names. But what about various other languages used in France, in French, in Spanish, in Latin, and even in various or regions of a country where different languages are spoken? One cannot identify what is a mango, what is a dog, what is a cat, what is a wheat, like that. So, for the ease of all the people, so that they can recognize a living organism commonly, what happens? Different biologists all over the world decided that the organisms should be given a scientific name. All right, scientific name should be given to the organisms for the ease of recognition of those organisms all over the world, so that when a person speaks about a specific organism, everyone is knowing that we are talking about that organisms. Okay, so these are called as scientific names. So what is a scientific name? Scientific name is a common name, biological name, which is given to each and every organism, and this scientific name is universally accepted. Okay, universally accepted means everyone accepts this name. By this name everyone understands what we are talking about. Okay, for example, I will give you an example of mango, which we call as mango. Now, this mango has been given a scientific name, Mangifera indica. Okay, this is the scientific name of mango. It is known as Mangifera indica. Similarly, different organisms have been given different names. Now you can see that I have written the name of mango, scientific name of mango. It is made up of two different words. Okay, so this is the characteristic of scientific name. What is the characteristic of scientific name? That it is comprised of two different names, okay, of which the first one is known as generic name and the second one is known as specific epithet. Commonly saying, a scientific name is made up of two names. The first is the name of the genus and the second is the name of the species. which is called as generic name and specific epithet. All the living organisms have been given such scientific names in which they are made up of a generic name and a specific epithet. That means two names. Each scientific name is made up of two names. This is known as binomial nomenclature. Okay, binomial bi means two, nomial means name, and nomenclature means naming. So this is known as binomial nomenclature. That means all the living organisms have been given a scientific name of which is made up of two names. First is, and mind it, first is the generic name and second is the specific epithet. Okay, this system of naming an organism, giving a binomial nomenclature, was given by the scientist Carolus Linnaeus. Okay, scientist Carolus Linnaeus, commonly known as Carl Linnaeus, has given this binomial nomenclature, and so he is called as father of nomenclature. Carl Linnaeus is known as father of nomenclature because he gave this system of naming the living organisms. So understand what is nomenclature, naming, and how a naming is done. There a scientific name is given. This scientific name includes two names. First is the genus name, that is generic name, and second is the species name, that is the specific epithet. Okay, such as I told you earlier, Mangifera indica. In this, Mangifera is the generic name and indica is the specific epithet. Now this nomenclature, this binomial nomenclature is accepted universally, and there are some universal rules of nomenclature. There are some universal rules of nomenclature. Now you have to remember it very well. What are these universal rules? Number one, that biological names, all the biological names are of Latin origin. Okay, means they will be of Latin origin because to maintain the common thing in between them, because if written in one language, these names will be common for all. So biological names are in Latin and they are written in italics. Wherever you will find in books, you will find in italics all the scientific names. So they are either derived from Latin or they are the Latin irrespective of their origin. They are Latinized, means origin wherever it may be, but the name is Latinized. Okay, so it is of Latin origin. Remember, maybe of origin, maybe Latinized. Second is, I told you earlier, the each scientific name or nomenclature includes first name of genus and second name of species, means generic name and specific epithet. Now, what is that? There is an important rule which you have to remember throughout your studies of biology. What is that? The two names, genus name and species name of any organism, are written separately, as I wrote Mangifera indica. They are always written separately. They should not be combined. Okay? And the first letter of the first word, that is first letter of genus, is written always in capitals, and the first letter of the species name is always written in small. Remember it. A scientific name, binomial nomenclature, means an organism having two names. First is the genus name, second is the species name, and there is a rule of writing this name. The rule is that both the names have to be written separately, number one. Number two, the first letter of the genus name is always written in capital. The first letter of the species name is always written in small. And one more important thing, that these two names are underlined separately. Make it a habit, whenever you write the scientific name anywhere, use first letter capital of genus, write first letter small of species, and don't forget to underline genus and species name separately. Don't join the line, they are underlined separately whenever written, or and when they are printed. In books you can find, when they are printed you will find them in italics. Okay, whenever in any exam, in any notes, make it a habit of writing this name as per the rules. This is called as binomial nomenclature. This is binomial nomenclature, a name having two parts. First is the genus name, other is the species name, both written separately. First letter common, first letter of species, first letter of the genus capital, first letter of the species is small, both underlined separately. Okay. Now, one more thing in this nomenclature, the name of the author, that means who named it, who named this organism, whether whatever organism it is. If the name of the author is known, that is also included in this name. How? For example, Mangifera. Mango is known as, written as Mangifera indica Lin. The name of the author is written in short, Lin. That means Linnaeus. Lin refers to Linnaeus. Carl Linnaeus named Mangifera indica, mango, in scientific name. So the name Lin is attached to the scientific name. Okay. Now this is nomenclature. Okay. And how now you have assigned names to the organisms. Now how will you study them? How will you study all these organisms? So vast variety. There comes a need of classification. Classification, what does it means? You all know, classify. You have been classified into different classes. How? Grouped. Okay? Classification means grouping. Grouping of organisms. Grouping of organisms is known as classification. Now, how is this grouping is done? How will you group? You all are in same class. How? Because you have something in common. You are different from the other student. You're sitting differently in different classes from the students studying different subject. How? Because you are different from them in some aspects. So this grouping is done on the basis of some specific characters. You can say some similarities and some dissimilarities. Those having similar are put in common group, and those are dissimilar are put in different groups. Okay, so there comes a need of grouping or classification to study them, and this grouping is done on the basis of specific characteristics. Now what is classification? Classification is the process by which any organism, anything is grouped into some specific categories. How? Based on their characters, means some similarities and some dissimilarities. These specific categories into which the organisms are grouped or classified are known as taxa. What is it? Taxa. Taxa means what? Taxa is the scientific term for category. Scientific term for category. Okay? The different groups, categories into which these organisms are classified or grouped is known as the taxa. So, based on the characteristics, all living organisms can be classified into different taxa. Again, how will we classify? Because based on their similarities, characteristics means what? Some similarities and some dissimilarities. Similar animals, similar organisms are grouped in similar group taxa, and different from them, similar with some, are grouped in different taxa. So this process, what is taxa? Category. Okay, organisms are categorized. So this process of grouping or categorizing or classification of the living organisms is known as taxonomy. Taxonomy, grouping into taxa. So this process, what is taxonomy? Taxonomy is the process of classification of living organisms. Okay. Now again the same thing. How are they categorized, or how this classification is done? Based on some characters. What characters will be there? What will be there? There will be some external, there will be some characters which have to be noted. What will be those? Some, there may be some external structure characters. There may be internal characters which will be taken into consideration. Okay. There will be some cell structures. There will be some processes, development processes of the organisms which will be considered. There will be some ecological information. How is this grouping done? This grouping is done on the basis of some characters. And what characters will be considered? Some external structures, some internal structures, cell structures, process of development, and ecological information. Based on this, the organisms will be grouped into similar or different groups. Now, you understand taxonomy. So the what is the process of taxonomy? What is the basics of the process of taxonomy? Basics of process of taxonomy. What are the basis? That means characterization. You have to identify or know about the characters of the organisms. Then there is identification. You have to identify those characters, understand them, identification. Then there is classification. Based on this characters, identifying those characters, you will classify them, is the classification. And then there is nomenclature. Once you have classified, you will name them accordingly. So these are the basics of the process of classification. So what happens in taxonomy? We group, we classify them, we put into different, we have a specific arrangement. So this arrangement, specifically on the basis of the characters, is known as systematics. Is known as systematics. Now what is systematics? Systematics is the branch or the study which refers to the systematic arrangement of organisms. Okay. How? Again, based on their characteristics. There are some similar characters, so they are grouped into common group or taxa, and some they exhibit differences from the others, so they are kept in the different taxa. Understand? You can say as the basics of taxonomy process that systematics. What is it? Systematics, the study that refers to the systematic arrangement of the organisms. So this systematic includes what? Includes characterization, because without the characters you cannot identify them or you cannot group them. Identification, you have to identify that character, classify them, you have to classify, group them, and then nomenclature. Okay, so this is systematics. Now systematics, the word you can very well understand is taken from systema. Systema is the word from which systematics is derived. Again, it is a Latin word. Latin word. As I told you earlier, Carl Linnaeus, he published a book, Systema Naturae. Important thing you will asked in MCQs, in NEET also. Carl Linnaeus produced a book, Systema Naturae, in which he has given classification of organisms. Understand? Now, these terms, have you understood it? What? As we have studied it now in diversity, what are those? First is, what is diversity? Huge variety of living organisms. Then biodiversity, same living organisms have existing in different varieties is biodiversity. It includes nomenclature, that is naming. How the nomenclature is done? By identification of what? Specific characters. And how the nomenclature or naming is done? It is a common name is given to the all the organisms, which includes two names, a name of the genus, name of the species, and it is worldwide accepted as the name of the genus. There are some rules of writing these biological or scientific names. The name of the genus written in capital, name of the species written in small, and both underlined separately. And there are some rules. What are those rules? Rules are that they are Latin names. They have Latin origin or they are Latinized. Then when printed, they have to be in italics. Now, based on this nomenclature, organisms are classified. Classified means grouped. How are they grouped? Grouped on the basis of some similarities and some dissimilarities. Various categories in which they are grouped is known as taxa. Taxa is the category, and this classification, this grouping is known as taxonomy. And how is it done? On the basis of some characters, maybe external, internal, which are considered, cell structure, process of development, ecological information, all these. So basics of taxonomy process, which form the basics of systematics. Systematics means systematic arrangement, again on the basis of characters, identifying characters based on similarities and dissimilarities and classifying them and giving names to them. This is known as systematics. Carl Linnaeus is known as the father of nomenclature, as he has given binomial nomenclature, and he has written book Systema Naturae, in which there is classifications of organisms. Enough for today now. Tune for my next video. Please like, share and subscribe. Thank you.